All right, so it's 1:33 here, Eastern Standard Time, or Eastern Daylight Time right now, whatever it is. So we'll go ahead and get rolling. So everybody, welcome to Andy Johnson's talk. He's going to kind of dissect ExpressionEngine 6 design and talk a little bit about decisions that were made and why they're made and what we did there, or really what he's been doing there. I know I have had nothing to do with the design portion of it. You don't want me doing that. But Andy is a designer out of Columbus, Ohio. Go Buckeyes! Where he helps clients with interface design via the studio shaping the page. And so, as we were just talking, he's been involved in the EE community for a very long time, including back to P-Machine days. And this year, he's been working alongside of the EE team in the design of EE6, overhauling that, making sure that it looks good, that it's usable, that everything is where it should be and looks and feels, and as the old adage goes, just trying not to make you guys think with the design and the UI. So with that said, only other housekeeping item is definitely happy to have you guys chat during the session. I'll try to look for any questions there and write them down or note them to the side. And then I think, Andy, we're going to do Q&A after you finish. Is that correct?
Yeah, we'll do it that way. Just because of my setup here, I actually can't see the chat room while I'm giving the presentation. So yeah, feel free to chat, talk about me behind my back. But at the end, I'll hang out and we can get some questions answered at that point, if that works.
Awesome, sounds good. So go ahead and put your questions in there. Think about your questions. You don't have to wait till the end. I'll note them off on a document here to the side, and then we'll go through all those at the end. So with that being said, I will pass it off to Andy. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Andy. And hey, everyone. It's great to be here. Wanted to start out by saying thank you to the EECA and for everybody who's been working behind the scenes just to make this conference a reality for this year. It's sort of an odd year, but it's great to be here and see everyone virtually. I'm having a lot of fun, and it's really an honor to be a part of this. Like Andy mentioned, I am Andy Johnson, an interface designer out of Columbus, Ohio, and I have been involved with the ExpressionEngine community since the very beginning. P-Machine was the very first CMS that I ever used, and I really credit P-Machine and ExpressionEngine for just getting me involved with web development to begin with. And to this day, ExpressionEngine, it's still my go-to CMS for new projects. And also, like Andy mentioned, this year has been a special year for me personally because I've had the privilege of working alongside the EE team on the design of ExpressionEngine 6, which has been incredibly exciting. And today we're going to walk through just some of the design decisions we've made as we've been building ExpressionEngine 6. And hopefully I can provide a little bit of background into the thinking that went into a lot of these decisions. If you haven't already, you should be able to double click on my slide on your screen in order to maximize its size. It's going to be a very visual oriented talk, so a zoomed in view might come in handy as we're looking at some of this stuff. We're going to cover a few different categories of EE6 design in the time that we have. So we're going to start with touching upon typography, and then we'll talk a little bit about the overall layout of the EE6 control panel. And then I want to talk a little bit about filters, components, and finally, I'd like to mention a few things about colors and theming in EE6. But before we jump into all of that, there are a couple of people I want to recognize. First, there's Jordan Ellis. Now, Jordan had already started work on the design of EE6 when it was handed off to our current team. So we were able to take Jordan's existing work and we just ran with it. So thank you to Jordan. And I also want to recognize James Mathias, who, if you don't know, he's been the lead designer behind the previous few versions of ExpressionEngine. And we've all benefited from his hard work over the years. So Shout out to Jordan, shout out to James, EE. You know, it has a rich history, and we just have a privilege of building on top of that history. So let's jump into things here. We're going to start with typography, and we're starting with typography because that's basically how we designed EE6. We designed it from the typography out, meaning we started by establishing our font sizing, our line height behavior, all the scaffolding, so that all of the control panel's type gracefully adapts from page to page, from layout to layout, from component to component. And you're going to see the results of that in just a minute. But first, let's talk about fonts. We all love fonts, right? In previous versions of ExpressionEngine, Helvetica and Arial have been at the top of the font stack. And, you know, I think they've served us well over the years, but web fonts have come a long way over the last decade. And for EE6, we're going to make a change. So we're switching over to Roboto, which was designed by Christian Robertson. It's maintained by Google. And it does provide us some good advantages over Helvetica and Arial. First, it's optimized for screen display. So especially with the design overhaul that Roboto received a few years ago, it has great legibility for both standard and HD screens. Roboto makes good use of horizontal space. So, and it does so without looking too condensed, doesn't look too choked. And this comes in handy when editing content in places where horizontal space is at a premium. So just imagine a very complex grid field where it's taking up a lot of horizontal space. Roboto performs well in those type of situations. It also had the right amount of healthy weights available, which we needed for the subtle emphasis that we wanted to provide throughout the UI. And maybe most important, it's been battle tested. You know, whether you realize it or not, all of us have more than likely used Roboto in the past. Maybe you use it every day in our favorite apps, our sites, operating systems, you name it, which for us means that most of the rendering and legibility bugs have been worked out over time. So it's a solid offering. And this one may not sound like a benefit, but it does have just the right lack of personality. You know, for the nature of a CMS, we want the client's content to be the focus, not the font that's displaying it. And, you know, Roboto manages to do its job without, you know, screaming about it, for lack of a better word. So in EE6, if you're in the control panel all day, you're going to be staring at Roboto all day. And it might be sort of a boring, safe choice by today's standards. There are just so many font options, web fonts available today, but I think boring and safe is what we were after here when making this decision. So you can say bye-bye to Helvetica and Arial, and hello to Roboto. And besides the font selection itself, we've also adjusted the use of font sizes and line height throughout the control panel. So in some parts of the UI, you're going to notice that, hey, text is larger, it's easier to read. In other parts, it's actually smaller, it's more space efficient. So we're hoping you'll find that the overall legibility and management of content has been improved throughout the control panel. Okay, so that's a little bit about typography. We'll start to see some of that in action as we get deeper in here, but let's move into this next section on layout. And before we walk through the layout of EE6, let's take a look at EE5 because we want to see where we're coming from. And specifically, let's take a look at the top of the screen. For years, EE has used a horizontal approach to organizing its header and main navigation. So we have the header bar, and then on the left side, that's been dedicated to the home link and the site name. And then on our right side, we've had the account menu and the logout. And then we have the main navigation bar. And on the left side, the publishing related actions. And then on the right side, the more developer focused tools and utilities. And I think this has served us really well over the years, but for EE6, we wanted to simplify the focus of these 4 areas and consolidate them into a single dedicated vertical sidebar. Sidebar navigation, it's not new as a UI pattern. It's definitely grown more popular over the last few years, probably for a variety of reasons. One of them being just monitor size and resolution. They continue to improve from year to year, which gives us more horizontal real estate to work with as interface designers. And then 2, it's really just plain easier to visually scan and read lists that are stacked vertically versus lists and targets that are arranged horizontally, especially when there are jumps of empty space between the targets, like there has been in the CP in the past. So the more friction we can remove in that regard, the better. So you're looking at a blank canvas here, and because we had a blank canvas to start with, it allowed us to really rethink ExpressionEngine's navigation from the ground up. And we started by just brainstorming all the potential screens and actions that could be candidates for the sidebar. We really didn't take anything for granted. We tried to forget the past momentarily and just get everything out onto the table. And this is what we had at the beginning. Obviously, way too many links and targets to be useful. So we had to narrow this list down to only the top candidates, which is how we ended up with these selections. And this is where it's good to bring up, there's always been this healthy tension in EE between what's best for end clients and new users versus what's best for experienced developers, if you know what I mean. When it comes to design, we have to take both perspectives into consideration. And that's part of how we decided how to narrow this list down. And really, as we get deeper into the control panel, we took that tension into consideration with all aspects of the control panel design. In other words, how do we design for both clients, end clients, and developers without accidentally diluting the experience for both audiences? Hopefully we nailed that balance in those places, but I'm sure as more people start to use EE6, we'll see further things that we can improve in that regard, and we'll certainly make those improvements as time goes on. So we've got these top candidates. Let's go ahead and add these to the sidebar. We're kind of building this together. This is sort of the process we went through to get to the end state. So these are the top candidates. This does give us a decent starting point. One of the great things about a product's navigation is it provides an opportunity to actually teach your audience how the product works. The nav can really reflect the very nature of your product, so to speak. In other words, in theory, someone who isn't even familiar with ExpressionEngine could log into the control panel, look at the main navigation, and have a good idea of what this product is, and maybe even a little bit about how it works. So if we look at where we're at here, if we want to take advantage of that teaching opportunity, we're going to need to organize this a bit better. This is just sort of a random throw it at the wall, and wherever they landed is where they landed. So we took the next step, and we tried to organize these different targets into buckets. So we came up with a content bucket, a members bucket, and then a more developer-focused tools and utilities bucket. And this is definitely better than where we were in the previous step. It's providing easy access to what we determined were the highest priority items, and they've been organized in some sort of a logical way in an attempt to reflect how ExpressionEngine works, the different parts of the application. So we looked at this and we realized, yeah, there's still a potential problem here. This is a lot still. We were concerned about, for lack of a better description, the cognitive load that this many targets would have on a user while using the control panel. In other words, yes, all of these targets are useful, but even too many useful targets can put a mental strain on users when those targets are all, they're all at the top level of a UI. Picture using the control panel every day, all day, like many of us developers do. Over time, mental fatigue can set in. That can become a source of friction. I've been designing interfaces for a long time. People aren't always able to explain why they don't like a UI. They just know that they don't like being in it. They can feel exhausted. All that to say, we felt like we needed to take this a step further. So we combined some of those targets and made the nav even simpler. And for us, this hit the sweet spot, at least for this initial iteration of EE6. So from here, it was just a matter of adding some polish to the design. And this is where we ended up. And you can see that, we obviated those buckets with the addition of some subheads. Again, a great way to teach new users how EE is organized, how it works. Plus, we think this design holds up well for experienced users too. A few other things I want to point out here with the sidebar that I haven't mentioned. Starting at the top and working our way down, you'll notice we've added the site name to the top of the sidebar. Obviously, this indicates which of your sites is currently in focus, but it also allows you to jump between your multiple sites. And you can even start the process of adding a new site right from the sidebar. So that's some handy functionality. And as we move down the sidebar, let's pause here and talk about the entries menu. For a long time, when it came to viewing, creating, and editing entries, EE, we're all familiar with it. It has used a two-menu approach. There's the create menu and the edit menu. Well, for EE6, we're trying something new. We're combining that functionality into a single menu. And it's pretty simple. You can choose to view all entries, or you can click on any channel name to view and edit the entries for that channel. Or you can click on the plus icon next to any channel in order to create a new entry for that channel. I know in the past, personally, I've had some clients get confused on which of the two menus to use when managing entries. And I've had to write little tutorials and reminders on this is the menu you should click to do these things. And this is the menu you should click to do these other things. So we'll see how successful this new approach is. It might take some getting used to, but over time, feel free to let us know if you hit any pain points or if your clients hit any pain points with this new approach. All right, and then we combine some of those previous targets. So we've got design now, which gives us access to channels, fields, and templates. And tools gives us access to sites, utilities, and logs. And then at the bottom of the sidebar, if you notice the display of the installed EE version, if you click on that target, EE will automatically check for updates if it hasn't already in the background. And it's going to show you the update status, as well as provide quick access to support, reporting bugs, the user guide. So it's a handy little UI component down there. But that's not all for the sidebar. So far, we've done our best to build and design a sidebar that functions really well for most users, we hope. But every project is different, every client is different, and we all have our personal preferences. So we've also added the ability to build a custom section within the sidebar nav. And this is where you can showcase custom links, like maybe directly to an add-on, or maybe a client needs easy access to a utility or some other page that's buried deep in the control panel. And you can even build your own custom flyout menus here in this space. So with this custom section, really the sky's the limit on how you want to customize this area of the sidebar for you or for your clients. Another thing to point out with the sidebar, I've mentioned horizontal space a few times, so it's worth noting that yes, you can collapse the sidebar into an icon-only view. So if you're on a laptop or a smaller screen and you're trying to squeeze as much space out of it as you can, well, here you go. You'll be able to do that, no problem. All right, so that's the sidebar. Now let's focus on the top of the screen, on the main header, because the main header serves a few functions for us. First, this is where you'll find the breadcrumbs for the control panel. And when working on the breadcrumbs, we went all the way back to EE1, sort of studied the evolution of the use of breadcrumbs over the years. For some versions of EE, they were extremely detailed. Other versions, they were more vague, less specificity, fewer layers of nesting. And for EE6, we've taken what we hope is a balanced approach to breadcrumbs. Enough specificity to be useful without being overly obnoxious. So again, another area we'd love to get your feedback as you get deeper into using EE6 on, did we strike a good balance? Are these useful? Would you like to see more detail or less? We're open for that type of feedback, absolutely. All right, so that's the left side of the main header. Let's jump over to the right side of the main header where we have the account menu and the jump menu. First, let's talk about the account menu. If you wondered where some of the missing account-related links were from the sidebar, here they are. You can always see who you're logged in as. You've got access to your profile information. You can change themes, which we'll talk about in just a minute. And you can also customize the quick links here in the account menu. Now, the jump menu. I know Tom introduced the jump menu during his keynote. So if you haven't seen Tom's keynote yet, I'd highly recommend checking out the recording. There's a reason we don't call this a traditional search menu, and there's a reason it's given such prominent real estate in the UI. For a lot of us, I'm just going to tell you, the jump menu is going to completely change how we interact with the control panel. It's not only a great navigation tool. I mean, once you start using this, you might never use the sidebar navigation again. It's just very efficient for navigation, but it's also a jumping off point for taking so many of the actions available in the control panel. I know Tom gave a little demo, but just to give you a quick example, and this is a very simple example, it can do things that are much more complex than what I'm about to show you, but just for the sake of demonstration, if I want to create a quick entry for a channel, I'll just hit Command or Control J. There we go, which gives me access to the jump menu. I'll just start typing the word entry. I can hit return, start typing the name of my channel, hit return, and I'm in that next action, all without leaving my keyboard. No mouse required. Honestly, we could do an entire session just on the jump menu. But my point here is that design-wise, it's been given prime real estate for a reason. So it's easy to access, always in view. And the jump menu, it's a good balance to the sidebar nav, I think, because if we've leaned toward simplicity with the sidebar nav for the sake of end clients and new users, then I think the jump menu is definitely focused on power users. So I believe we're giving people the best of both worlds in that regard. Okay, so that's the main header. As we move down the page, let's take a look at the section title. That's this area here. This is reserved for any section of the control panel that might have multiple screens, like in this example, the members section of the CP. And the right side of the section title is reserved for section level actions. In this case, that would be creating a new member or editing the member section settings. And then moving down, we have our section subnavigation, which allows us to navigate within a section. And then finally, the workspace of the layout. So this is the main workspace. This could be, it could be a form in this space, a table list, an asset manager. This is where the work gets done, obviously. So that is a pretty standard layout that we've reused throughout the control panel. I should also mention that we've moved from, to a full width layout in EE6, full width. So we no longer have a maximum width on the control panel's layout. So you can start getting your money's worth out of those big HD monitors that you've purchased when you're using the control panel. So if we take a look at this, overall, although we've covered some design changes for EE6, overall there's a lot here that should look familiar to us. If you know EE, you'll be able to run with EE6 right out of the gate, no problem. And we could go on, but that's all I'm going to cover for layout for now. There are some things I wanted to touch upon regarding filters, okay? Because there are some changes to filters that we're in the process of making that I wanted to point out, so you can, just to build anticipation. This is a typical table list in the control panel, probably the most used table list, the list of entries on the main entry screen. And you'll notice that the filters have been redesigned and reorganized. And we had some goals in mind here. One, we wanted to make it clear that there's a cascading relationship between the filters and the search input. In other words, the search field is restricted to only returning results that are allowed by the active filters above it. So visually, we wanted the filters to come before the search to sort of reinforce that cascading relationship. Another goal we had in mind was we're now allowing the ability to clear individual filters on these table lists. So in EE5, it was sort of, all or nothing. If you had 5 filters applied and you changed your mind and wanted to eliminate one of them, you were sort of out of luck. You had to clear all of them and then start over and rebuild your filter criteria. But as you can see in the screenshot, each filter that's been applied has its own clear icon. So you can sort of just pick and choose and clear one without losing all of them, which I know that's kind of bitten me in the past with previous versions of EE. 3, as far as goals, we wanted to make the search field simply a bigger target. Most of the time, a person comes to a table list and they already know exactly what they want to search for. All they want to do is just start typing. In EE5, the search field, it was sort of mixed in with the other filters, but in EE6, it's a bigger target for sure. And on some pages, it depends on the nature of the page, it is the focused input by default on page load. So if you come to the entry screen and you know what you want to search for, you can just immediately start typing to find what you're looking for. No tabbing, no mouse required. Or if you're a power user, you can just skip the screen altogether and Command J into the jump menu, and it's a done deal. Just throwing that out there. And while we're here looking at filters, I wanted to point out the columns manager. I think Tom showed this off in his keynote, but from this drop down over here, the columns manager, you can turn on and off columns in the table list. You can reorder columns the way that you want to see them. Plus, it even remembers your custom views across channel filters. So for example, when viewing entries for your blog channel, you might want a specific set of columns shown in the table list that are different than when you're viewing your product channel entries. The column manager, it remembers that for you. So it's pretty cool. You can jump back and forth between channels, and how you had things set up will remain that way as you're toggling back and forth, which is awesome. So that's a little bit about filters. That's all I'm going to cover now. There's some more stuff we're working on, but for now, you're going to see a lot of this functionality start to spread across the control panel as the beta period progresses. So keep an eye on that. Okay, components. Just want to quickly touch on this. It's worth noting. As you've probably noticed from the screenshots, we've completely redesigned all of the UI components for EE6. So that means everything from buttons and form inputs and drop downs, alerts, toolbars, list groups, pagination, radios and checkboxes and color pickers and toggles and date pickers. It's all been redesigned. And not only that, but it's worth pointing out that we've built in different sizes for many of our components, which has allowed us to more gracefully adapt components to the needs of the task at hand. For example, if we have a layout like this form layout in the general settings, we can make our call to action buttons and form fields larger when it makes sense. So we think your clients, as they're moving through the control panel, they're going to have an easier time editing content. It's just easier to see. It's a more pleasant experience. But we also have the flexibility to make components smaller when space is at a premium, like in a drop-down menu, for example. So that's a change in EE6, where we're now using component size as a usability tool. That's components. Now let's talk a little bit about colors and theming. I think this is worth exploring a little bit. EE has had sort of third-party theming in the past, but we've taken it a step further for EE6. Out of the box, EE6 beta is shipping with 2 themes. So we have our default light theme, and we have our default dark theme. And looking into the future, we really wanted to streamline the process of creating new themes for EE. And we kept that in mind while building out our SAS and CSS files and designing just the overall color palette for EE6. Okay, for example, if we look at this default light theme, it's a very monochromatic approach to colors. We completely started over in EE6 when it came to colors. So we're not using a different colors for buttons or backgrounds or panels. The hue is consistent pretty much throughout the entire interface. We've only added additional colors and hues to the palette when and where it's absolutely necessary for emphasis. And as a result, it turns out it's very easy to emphasize something in EE6 in the UI. It really only takes a whisper to grab your attention. There aren't a lot of different hues and colors competing for your attention. So it's really just a single base color that's running the entire control panel. Let me show you what I mean. So for the default light theme, we started with this ExpressionEngine purple color. And there are dozens of variations of this color that make up the control panel. And we knew that if anyone wanted to create an EE theme in the future, it would pretty much be hell to have to customize and tweak all of those colors in a way that produced a result that looked nice. So instead, we built our SaaS to auto-generate all the colors needed for the control panel based off of that single primary base color. So people were joking about a pink theme before the talk started. Yeah, so if you wanted to make a pink theme or something close to pink, this isn't exactly pink, but you get where I'm going with this. You could swap out that primary base color, and automatically all the other colors needed for the control panel will be generated for you. Or maybe your client has a blue branding color. Just pick your blue and boom, it's a done deal. Now, there might be some slight SAS saturation tweaking that you'll want to make based on how crazy the color is that you pick. Obviously, if you pick a fluorescent green, it might require just a little bit more tweaking so that the control panel isn't so obnoxious. But my point is, you can go from something like this to this to this and back again with very minimal effort. All that to say, we have some ideas for the future on how to make theming the control panel accessible for everyone, and we've set it up from the beginning with that in mind. So stay tuned for more on that to come. Which brings us to what's next. Where do we go from here? We're getting ready to release a beta next week. Well, from a design perspective, for the EE team, right now it's all about iterate, iterate, iterate. Honestly, we still have a lot of design work to do. Just want to make that completely transparent. If you download the beta next week, you'll still see a lot of rough edges in the design. And some of those edges have already been smoothed out and polished and submitted for later betas. But our design to-do list, it's still quite long. We're working on it. If you see something that doesn't look quite right, don't hesitate to reach out to us because we will add it to our list. Ultimately, our goal is to have the design polished and rock solid by the end of the beta period, so it's ready for that initial launch. On a side note, I wanted to close by mentioning, like many of you, I've been invested in ExpressionEngine for years. It's helped me build a business. It's paid bills for my family. Anytime EE has gone through major transitional periods in the past, both as a company and as a product, I'll be honest, it's made me nervous because the stakes are high for so many of us. But I can tell you, after this year working with Tom and the team, they're not only extremely talented and passionate about making EE the best product it can be, but I can tell you they're committed to supporting the community as well. ExpressionEngine is in good hands and the future is bright. No one asked me to say that. It's just a personal observation after working with this team. I figure if I get nervous about these transitions, maybe some of you do too. But after working with the team, I'm convinced this is a new era for ExpressionEngine, and it's safe to be excited about it. So on that note, on behalf of the rest of the team, hey, thanks for supporting ExpressionEngine, and thanks for hanging out with me. I'll be here for a little bit. If you have questions, I'll do my best to answer them. Otherwise, take care, and I'll see you around the interwebs. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much, Andy. That was quite an amazing walkthrough of the design of the control panel there. I've seen iterations of this over the year and everything like that, but I don't even think that I've seen that in depth of a thought process or a walkthrough. So really appreciate you taking the time. And I think that really opens up for everyone a lot of insight, or gives them a lot of insight into why decisions are made. And I think that's so important in design, that we're not just making changes, as somebody said, make changes just to make changes. We're not just putting a cool new button on there because it looks cool or fun or something like that, but there's actually a thought process and a reasoning behind that. And I really think, again, I think kind of the theme with EE6 has been setting that foundation for the future. And I think that's really what you've done here for us. So lots of excitement from the chat. I know you couldn't see the chat as you were presenting there. A lot of people are happy about no more max width. I know I ran into that a lot of times when developing for clients. New entries listing looks great. Going to be a big help to clients. Some people mentioned how they had to kind of escort their clients around the entries listing page and show them where the search function was, and now that's all in the forefront. So that's going to be extremely helpful for clients. Of course, the jump menu, it's okay. Some people care about it, whatever. But no, we're all excited about that. And I think you really surprised people there at the end with the theming and how those colors worked. I think some comments were my jaw just hit the ground, and I think some people fainted. They're probably just now coming back to on that. So we'll go ahead and go through some questions that were asked. Guys, if you got more questions, just put it there in the chat and I'll try to get to them. Also, I think, Tom, we have some time here. So Tom, if you don't mind sharing your audio and video. Andy, there were just some questions about functionality. And so I thought that it might be good to have Tom join us to answer some of those questions as well. So we'll go ahead. Tom, you should be good to go. All right. So one question Oliver had was if Menu Manager is still available somewhere. And I don't think we've taken that out, have we? Menu Manager still within the...
I believe Andy ended up showing that after the question was asked. But yes, the Menu Manager is there. It also will do the flyout menus. Wow, if I could speak.
Yep.
So it should be in good shape.
Jason Boothman asked, is there a way to hide native sidebar links? Example, we might want to hide the files link if we want users to use assets add-on instead.
Yeah, great question. I don't think there is yet, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you can add things to it, but as far as taking away default, you cannot yet.
I believe native permissions might come into play. Like if somebody can't access channels, for instance, or creating a channel, I think it would block that. That's a valid point. I definitely see where that question's coming from. So yeah, I think when Andy said not yet, that was a pretty solid response. I'd agree.
All right. Caroline asked, has it been tested with browser session font size adjustments? So I guess, Caroline, are you talking about when people increase their font size and everything for the browser? Have we tested as far as that goes?
Yes, we have started that. One of the things we're working on behind the scene is mobile optimization. So there is a start to that in this initial release of the beta. And also what you mentioned, Caroline, with being able to increase and decrease font sizes without the layout breaking. We have a lot of that covered already, but we're still working behind the scenes on that. So during the beta period, as you download updates to the beta, you'll see that continue to improve as we get closer to the initial release. That's definitely one of the big projects we have going on behind the scenes that is taking a lot of work to make sure it's done right. Yeah,
and I think that rolls into what Jared just asked, which is, did you prioritize or factor in accessibility in any of your design choices, like font sizes, colors, contrast?
Yeah, we did. As far as the responsibilities that I had, yeah, when it comes to colors, we use some accessibility tools to make sure that contrast and differences between tints and hues were easy to be distinguished from an accessibility perspective. Font sizes, yeah, I think I mentioned a little bit about how we have increased font sizes in a lot of areas in the control panel. That should help make it a more pleasant editing experience. There are places where we've kept the font sizes smaller just for the sake of real estate. But of course, you can increase the font size in your browser, and the end goal is the layout should hold up just fine. If it doesn't in the initial beta, it's because we just haven't pushed those fixes quite yet.
And Tom, I think you made a post a few weeks ago, right? Or at least a few weeks ago. Everything's moving so fast lately about accessibility. So I don't know if you want to say anything to that.
What I will say is, broad stroke accessibility isn't where we want it to be yet. Part of that is we just want to do a lot better job than where it's at. We've had some meetings internally about this. I even hesitate to say this because we kind of did a round of, I would call it low-lying fruit, honestly. Just like, hey, we can't just not address some of this. So we did go through and we did a round of kind of accessibility tweaks. This is something we plan on focusing on in the future, and we will continue to, kind of set our stride in a direction that's positive for accessibility. I know Andy Johnson and I have chatted as well about the potential of like a high contrast theme and stuff like that. So these are things that are on our radar. We do take that serious. It's something we want to walk towards more and more.
Yeah, I think as we've said, we know there's still a lot more to do. This is only beginning. So Josh asked, will Command S or Control S for Windows people save entries? I know that was a discussion we had earlier a while back, but I don't think we've moved forward on any of that as yet, right?
I'm racking my brain trying to remember. I'd have to go back through like our ticket management and see if that's one we finished. I've seen that come up a bunch of times actually in the conversation throughout the conference. So we'll loop back on that one and check it out. We would support, kind of either option, most likely Windows, Mac, Control, Command, so forth and on.
Yep. All right, getting a little into the weeds here. So Doug and several others were asking about the columns in the entry manager listing. So Doug asked specifically, how does the column search in the entry manager deal with fluid fields, grids, images, etc.? And Blair followed up asking about filtering on custom fields.
I'll let you answer that, Tom, since it deals with tying into the database information that's available there.
Yep, great question. I know that there is some image support. Honestly, this would be a better question to pull Yuri into than me. I don't think I've personally thrown a fluid field in there or a grid for that matter. What I can say is the way it's built under the hood. Yuri just said something there. He can jump in and answer that. You want me to jump off and let Yuri answer that?
No, stand by. I'll adjust the session, okay. I think, so that he can get it in here.
Okay.
Keep on talking.
From a programming standpoint, the way it's built, if you will, it does give us the ability to have some sort of display. When you get into things like grids and fluid field, though, or even just long, body article entry type things, I think there's a trade-off with UI UX and how much you want to let display as well, right? Like, you don't really want to get to the edit entries page and have 20 entries show up at each. You have to scroll like 50 pages because somebody put a dictionary in each of the 20 entries. So I think there's a bit of a trade-off there as well that we probably need to look at. I know we addressed some of it for like larger blog entries. I want to say we limited it to 250 characters or something like that. So I'll just throw this out there too. We're something like that. At custom columns, we're going to give it the best shot we can. Building building the system of how it saves per channel. You can drag and drop and show what you don't show. Believe it or not, we worked through probably 12 iterations until we got to a point where we felt like, hey, this is solid. This is good. Why do I mention that? Because I have zero doubt that what we ship in 6.0 is going to be tweaked and changed, and it's going to need to be changed. So there will be some hiccups like that, and we'll work through them. We'll get them addressed. It will get better.
Hello, Yuri.
Yeah, hi everyone. So just to Tom said about the column manager. For images, we do have, and for file manager, for files field, we do have some sort of rudimentary support, like we just display files as links. We might review that sometimes in the future. If display some sort of thumbs or anything. For the fluids and grid, just like Tom said, they are too complex, and for initial adoption, we are not including those. There are some chances we might be revising this in the future, but just not yet, because we see many potential issues with those. And yes, the custom field, most of the custom fields would work out of the box. Some that are more complex would need to have certain code, like really tiny bit added to them to support it, which I covered in my talk yesterday, and this will be also available in the docs once we make them.
All right, awesome. So questions about file manager. So I think these will be some happy answers here, which is, I forgot who asked it. Somebody asked earlier if the file manager has thumbnails. And I think the answer to that is yes. And Benoit just asked, does the file manager have a copy link for files images? And I am super excited to say that that is back in EE6 and works phenomenally well. I was pointing that out to the team the other day, how that was a big thing that was missing. So it's super easy when you have the file up there to just click on the link and grab that now. Some people are asking about white labeling or adding custom logos to give your clients those warm and fuzzies when they log into their control panel. Is that available in E6?
That's one of the items that will be in Pro, but not the open source free version, if you will. So that will be available, but not kind of in the beta or the 6.0 release. That will be in the Pro theming and the branding rather. So.
All right. Good one here from Oliver, which I know has been thoroughly discussed, is any chance there's going to be a duplicate entry option?
That's so okay. Duplicating entries.
It's hard.
This is something we've talked about a good bit. It is pretty difficult. The reality is, there is some add-ons that do a pretty decent job. The reality is that we, as a company, if you will, are in the best place. If you compare like how add-ons have done it in the past, I should say, and how the core could do it, as a company with the core, we are in the best place to provide the mechanism for that to happen. So why do I say that? When you get into third-party add-ons, the reality is there just has to be an effort for add-on developers to support cloning. Where my mind goes right off the bat is images. It's great when you pull an image in to an entry, but then when you clone it, if there's modifications done to that image on the entry, do you clone over those modifications using like a third-party service? Do you start with the blank image again? And then that might not be what people are expecting either. So this is something that's on our radar. The reality is, most likely scenario, we would provide the mechanism for it, but the implementation of it would be by and large in add-on developers' hands. So.
Awesome. And so along with that, Megan asked, are there plans to add any duplicate field function where we can just update field short name? So this actually, I had somebody talking to me about this the other day where they wanted to replicate a lot of fields and just change the names. Is that anything that we've discussed? I don't think it's in there right now or in 6, but.
So just to make sure I'm following this, like you could go in and find a channel entry field and say like, hey, I want to clone this, to add a second image field instead of building the whole thing out. Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah. Funny enough, I don't think I have run into this one before. Somebody talking about it. I've done a lot of calls with people to hear people's thoughts. If you haven't heard this one, right off the bat, my gut reaction is no. Yuri, if I'm thinking about this correctly, though, the way that we already have the export-import functionality around channels and channel fields, part of me is like, from a development lift, that might not be that heavy of a lift. You have any thoughts on that?
Well, I don't think you can build with export-import because you will get name conflicts. But
Yeah,
I haven't really tried using it for this purpose.
Yeah, what we did the other day was they used export and then just edited the JSON files for like the new name and everything like that, but left all the other field settings the same and re-imported them to create all that pretty quickly. But yeah, we can definitely discuss that in more detail. We're running out of time now, so.
I just want. And one thing, this is a good feature request, so please add it to GitHub ExpressionEngine /ExpressionEngine GitHub as an issue, so we would know it's there and keep an eye on it. This would really help us.
Please.
All right. I just want to make sure. I think next is the awards. So we have a little bit of time. I can tell the team to stand by. I don't know. Is there anything else? Somebody was asking to hear more about Pro. I think right now our focus, Tom, is just on getting the 6 beta out the door. Let's get that out and done, and then we're going to information about what Pro is going to do and all that kind of piece. Okay, some implementations about how we can do that. So I think that's good. It's 2:30 now, so we'll go ahead and wrap up. Of course, you can ping anybody from the EE team in the chat. You can grab us on the EE CMS Slack as well. We're on there pretty regularly. Always shoot us an email if you want to, any kinds of things like that. I know Tom's more than willing to talk about your pain points or what you'd like to see to improve ExpressionEngine. The best is yet to come, to take the old cliche there, but we're just getting started with it, and we're excited about where it's going to go. So thank you, Tom and Yuri, for jumping on there last minute. Appreciate that. Andy, definitely appreciate your time today, walking us through the design, as I mentioned earlier. This is a huge improvement for ExpressionEngine as far as, I like how you phrased all that it served us well. The design has served us well for a long time as we just escorted into modernity, if you will, and bring it up to par here and set that foundation for the future. So appreciate everybody's time. Again, catch everybody in the lounges or wherever. We've got the awards coming up on the main stage right now. And then we'll have the developer roundtable followed by kind of closing ceremonies there at the end. So other than that, I bid you guys farewell. See you guys.